to thank everybody for being here tonight on this hot day of August after we had some fall-like summer days and summer nights. So it's really great to see everybody virtually as we slowly reintegrate into quote unquote our normal. Hopefully it will continue on that trend, and just what's happening right now is just a little hiccup. So my name is Jennifer Zack, and I work in the advancement department at the Trail Conference. We've been trying out this new series of Trail Insiders to keep people engaged during the pandemic for whatever reason, just to give something to do on a Wednesday night to educate yourself a little bit more about the work that the Trail Conference does, or to give people some social interaction who are not quite comfortable yet going out and exploring. So tonight we have a really great program for everybody. The really cool thing about the Trail Conference is that you may know that the Trail Conference maintains over 2,100 miles of trails, and that might be it. So that could be the extent of people's knowledge of what the Trail Conference is. Oh yeah, they're the people who do the trails, or oh yeah, I have their maps and books. They're great. They get me found on the trail and get me to point A to point B. But the really interesting part of the Trail Conference is that it really has multifaceted layers, and it has the whole gamut. So yes, we are responsible for keeping the trails maintained and the lands that they traverse through accessible for all. But we also do a lot of outreach and education. And part of that is through our Trail Steward program. So tonight we're going to be highlighting that program. We're going to be getting a really in-depth look at why this was created, how the program is working, how it's being duplicated across other regions, and how it's really become a pilot and a poster child for this type of stewardship of the lands. Tonight it is being presented by Hank Osborne, my colleague, who is the Director of Programs and the Trail Steward Program Manager. So this is his baby. So please, again, if you have any questions, chat them in the box and we will get to them. But I'm going to turn it over to Hank.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I'm going to be presenting about outreach and education stewards and why managing high-use trails, why trail stewards are a necessity in creating safe, sustainable trails. So my name is Hank Osborne. I'm the Director of Programs at the Trail Conference, and I'm also the manager of our outreach and education Trail Steward programs. And in 2013, I was hired by the Trail Conference as the East Hudson Program Coordinator. And a few months later, after I was hired, we launched the very first Trail Steward pilot season. And I am very proud of what our programs have become, and I am convinced that they are effective. And the slideshow presentation that I have prepared for tonight, it's almost entirely photographs, beautiful photographs. But this next slide is one of only 2 slides containing text. And there is a lot of text in this slide because we have a lot of Trail Steward locations now. And this list may be a little bit daunting, but it's basically where we're stationed in 2021 with different models of programs. And in 2021, we trained about 120 people to be trail stewards. And just going through this list, you can see the top 6 ones all start with the word core. So our Americorps program, we have 18 Americorps trail stewards, and they're doing 900 hours of service this season. So they started in May and they're going all the way until almost November. And those Americorps stewards, which I'm listing here as core trail stewards, they're out about 5 days a week. So they're on the ground, either at trailheads or on the trails or at key intersections, or they're performing trail maintenance or litter pickups or educating the public in other ways. And they're there 5 days a week. We also have volunteer trail stewards, and you can see down near the bottom, there's a couple bullets for volunteer trail stewards. And we have 10 volunteer trail stewards in Hudson Highland State Park and in Fonsstock, and we trained over 40 volunteer trail stewards for the Ashokan Rail Trail up in the Catskills, southern Catskills. And we've also trained staff from New Jersey DEP and staff from New York State Parks. And we do that every year. This year we trained 22 from those two organizations combined. And we also, at the very bottom, we trained 25 members of Rockland County's Conservation and Service Corps, a 2-day training to have them be able to field stewards. But our core trail steward trainings, they take weeks and weeks and weeks, and each component can be multiple days. For example, Wilderness First Aid is a 3-day intensive first aid and CPR certification, and the Leave No Trace certification is 3 days. So this current slide is simply detailing all the locations where we have stewards fielded this season, 2021. All except one location, because over the weekend, a very important bridge for the Appalachian Trail that crosses the New York Thruway, I-87, that bridge closed and now prohibits the hikers that are on the Appalachian Trail from getting across the highway. So we have done a last-minute switch, and we have been able to field 2 stewards at the junction of the new reroute that we have designated, so that the many through hikers that are coming from Georgia to Maine this time of year are able to get across the thruway. It's adding several miles to their hike, but we're able to get the information to the hikers so they can figure out which trails to get on to get around the highway. So the history of the Trail Steward program, it all starts with flip-flops. Back in 2013, we received a phone call from the regional director of New York State Parks, and it was a pivotal moment. And I learned of a very challenging situation in one of our state parks. Only 50 miles from New York City, a trail with beautiful views had been discovered, and visitation had increased dramatically. And it turned out that hundreds of visitors were getting lost, and they were getting hurt, and they were requiring rescues. And the local emergency services were overtaxed. And it turned out that there was an average of 2 to 4 rescues required every single weekend. And the place I'm talking about is Breakneck Ridge. And people were basically unprepared for the challenging rock scramble ahead of them, and they were attempting to hike with no water, and many of them wore completely inappropriate footwear, like boots with no shoelaces and no socks, and some people had high heels, and some people had flip-flops, and some people had high-heeled flip-flops. And the visitors were also straying off of the marked trails, so they weren't staying on the trails, and they were creating their own social trails and desire lines because there were so many people following each other off the trails, and trampling the plants and vegetation and going into areas where there were not supposed to be trails. So these visitors were greatly impacting the native plants and the animals and causing more hikers to get lost by creating these new trails just by walking where they weren't supposed to be. And hikers were so the hikers were leaving the trails, and they were also leaving garbage. And so the director of state parks for this region asked what we could do to try to help. And explained that the Parks Department didn't have any additional resources, but would like us to try to station somebody at the trailhead. So we tried, and we did, and we responded to the park's request for help by creating a pilot program that summer in 2013, and it was an instant success, and we collected the data to prove it. And when our trail stewards were on duty, the need for rescues was reduced. It was reduced to 0, and nobody attempted the trail in flip-flops. So as the allure of unplugging from technology and reconnecting with nature draws more and more people outdoors, the need to protect our natural places has become paramount. And the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference has now been expanding the Trail Steward programs, and we are committed to educating and assisting the public in the safe and enjoyable and responsible use of trails. Now, this photo that's up right now, it kind of represents the allure of unplugging from technology and reconnecting with nature. But the next photo that I'm about to show shows a reality on one of our trails. So increased use and misuse of the most popular outdoor destinations is threatening the ecological integrity of these special places. In the greater New York metropolitan region, the Trail Conference has taken a leadership role in coordinating stewardship efforts to keep up with the growing threats. And they're the threats to the trails, threats to the environment, threats to the well-being of the visitors, and threats to the local communities surrounding the trail systems. And the Trail Conference has joined with the land managers and local partners to expand the programs at multiple trailheads and summits in New York and in New Jersey. Now, at Breakneck Ridge, up until recently, every Saturday and Sunday, 6 trains from Grand Central Station arrived every Saturday and Sunday. And the stop is basically in the middle of nowhere except for the trailhead. And the stewards count the hikers that are coming to the trailhead and getting off the trains. And some of the trains unload hundreds of hikers at once. The most hikers that we ever recorded disembarking from a single train was 525. That means that 500 people are beginning their hike all at the same time. Now, train service was suspended in 2020, but it is scheduled to resume service this coming spring. And based on these trail counts that we're doing just at Breakneck alone, visitation is possibly exceeding 250,000 hikers annually on that one trail. And the stewards count the hikers. They also implement surveys, and these surveys have helped us discover that the majority of these people are experiencing, of the visitors, they're experiencing one of their very first outdoor adventures. And in many cases, they're hiking for the first time in their lives. And for some of the visitors, it is actually their absolute first time experiencing nature at all. And our trail stewards are in a position to shape that experience. So we've expanded our training to additional outside groups as well. As I mentioned before, we train New York State Parks Department staff and New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection staff and other conservation and service corps, besides our own Americorps members and our own volunteers. And so we've expanded the training, we've expanded the number of locations, all to meet this dramatic rise in the number of hikers that are coming to visit the trails. And this image is showing a combined training of Trail Conference Americorps members and New York State Parks staff. And this is early this spring, and you can see everyone wearing masks and socially distanced. And here we have another training, and our trainings include many different topics about connecting with visitors and messaging and how to use talking points, and all the trainings are based on lots and lots of research and coordination with partners and stakeholders and other groups to try to figure out the best approach for each area. And then we design the program and then design the training to communicate it to the stewards, so the stewards then communicate to the visitors. And one of the most important components of our trainings is teaching the 7 leave no trace principles. So the stewards are trained, it's a 3-day course, and they're trained to be able to teach those principles. And for those of you that haven't heard of Leave No Trace, it's an organization, national organization that basically is trying to do exactly what trail stewards are trying to do, which is to protect the environment. And the 7 principles are to plan ahead and prepare, to travel and camp on durable surfaces. And some of our areas don't allow camping, but that's still something that the stewards need to educate the visitors about. 3 is dispose of waste properly. 4 is leave what you find. 5, minimize campfire impacts. And in many of our parks, campfires are prohibited, but stewards educate the visitors that fires are not allowed, and also take away fire rings, dismantle fire rings where people have made fires, and that discourages the next people from making a fire in the same location when it's prohibited. And respecting wildlife and being considerate of other visitors. Steward guidance also extends beyond the trails, and I talked about local communities, and the stewards provide recommendations on things to do in nearby trail towns. And the people coming to hike on the trails, they talk to the stewards and they ask all sorts of questions about where to eat and what to do, and the stewards are able to promote the main streets or the villages, and it's promoting a deeper sense of community around our parks. And stewards encourage hikers to visit the local towns. They tell them where to eat and shop. And many of the towns have a local outfitter shop, which becomes our sponsor in some form with in-kind donations of uniforms or other things. And the stewards go to the shops for fittings or to get their discounts, and they meet the staff, and they make a connection with the retailer, which is a place where they then direct lots of visitors. The stewards, here's a shot of our Hudson Valley stewards, one of our Americorps crews. So we had 11 Hudson Valley stewards that stewarded at various locations. They're out tomorrow, and they'll be on the ground. But they're divided. This group of 11 is divided into smaller groups of 2 or 3 or 4, depending where they are stationed. But they collect lots of data, and it becomes invaluable, this data, for planning purposes. And we've been able to document the tremendous rise in visitorship that we've seen even before this pandemic, but also especially during the pandemic. And we've also been able to see the dramatic decline in the amount of first aid required and rescues and emergency services as a result of trail stewards. And through the data collection, we know when the majority of lost hikers start their hikes, and it's not really a surprise, but most of the lost hiker rescues are rescuing people that started their hike within an hour or 2 of sunset. And so we can reassign stewards to be on site at trailheads during those critical hours to educate people that it's the park closes at dusk, and if you go up to the top of a mountain and watch a sunset, it means that your hike back down is in the dark. So basically they intercept the potential lost hikers before they even enter onto the trails. And the on-site education reduces the risk that people will stay out after dark and need a rescue. And also with data collection, we track the weather, we track the temperature, and we actually have been able to determine, we now know the exact 5-degree air temperature when illegal swimming is mostly likely to occur. And it's, of course, there's less swimming when it's cold out, but we also discovered there's very little swimming when it's above 94 degrees as well. And we can reassign stewards to intercept illegal activities, swimming or other things, whatever the temperature dictates. So we have this data because stewards collected it. And I have so many before and after photos. Stewards are constantly taking pictures and submitting pictures. And I chose, these ones are a few years old, but I like these ones because it's, if I'm only going to show you one set of before and afters, this is a nice clear one. But this is on Giant Ledge in the Catskills. And this is just after 3 we started this location in 2016, and in just 3 years, the fragile alpine ecosystem started showing obvious signs of recovery because the stewards, they talked to the campers that were not supposed to be camping in certain locations, and they educated the visitors about the impacts to the environment. And these pictures just show that stewards make a difference. And here we have a steward after collecting some garbage, and another thing that stewards, so they'll pick up garbage when there's less busy times and there's not a lot of visitors. They'll keep themselves busy by cleaning up after other people, but they often right on site will hand out trash bags to interested hikers, and the hikers then pick up the garbage along their hiking route and return the filled bags back to the trailhead at a garbage collection point. And the hikers feel a sense of accomplishment and they enjoy making a difference, and the stewards are able to provide them genuine appreciation right in the moment. And the power of the person in person is powerful. This is a shot of Catskill partners. So in the Catskills, we need to coordinate with the land manager, who's DEC, and DEC has DEC rangers and foresters and our stewards, and our cell phones don't work there, so we need to use radios. So we use radios to communicate with the foresters and the rangers and each other. But in other areas where cell phones do work, they call 911 if a hiker's hurt. But oftentimes the hikers call the trail stewards, and they're able to do that because the trail stewards have cell phones that are issued to the program, and the cell phone number of the trail steward telephones is printed on all the maps. Even the state park maps have the phone number printed on them to call the steward. So if somebody's lost or hurt or he has questions, they call the phone number on the map and it goes right to the trail stewards. Trail stewards are trained in first aid and CPR, and some of our stewards are actually wilderness EMTs, which is a really advanced course that takes many weeks of training. One of the points I like to make with their first aid training is that in almost every situation when there's an injury or emergency, the trail stewards are the ones that arrive on the scene with the first aid supplies first, before any outside emergency services are able to get to the lost or injured hikers. And it's simply because the trail stewards are already on site and they have a shorter distance to travel to get to the injured hiker, but they also know all the trails, they know all the shortcuts. They're in great physical shape because they run up and down the mountains all day. And in most cases, the trail stewards, when they get there first and they're called first, they actually completely eliminate the need for any other rescue agencies to even get involved at all, because the trail stewards are in a position to take care of most of the problems themselves. This is a shot of our Vernal pool steward program. You'll notice the steward is wearing a hat because it's cold. The hikers are maybe a little bit underdressed, but the Vernal pool steward program happens only in the very early spring. And we just completed our second season of it, and it's a program in the Hudson Island State Park based around a very sensitive, very prominent vernal pool, which it's a seasonal pool of water that has peeper eggs in it in the spring, little baby tree frogs, and it's a place where there's a very high potential of people to have their dogs off of the leash and the dogs running through the egg masses. So we started a program to try to educate people about protecting the vernal pool, and it's working. We've collected a lot of great data and have some great reports to show about the impacts that we're making. And the biggest change is keeping the dogs out of the vernal pool. So here's just a shot of a trail steward giving directions. And I just wanted to mention about funding. A lot of times people have questions about how we pay for this. And we pay for this program with the funding that comes from private individuals mostly. But we also get it from foundations, we also get it from corporations, and we also get some from government agency grants. but a huge part of it is private individuals. And it's not something where we have baked in government funding paying for the service, even though I personally believe that it really benefits the local communities and the parks and the trails so much, and the visitors. But where we are now, the funding is coming from private individuals mostly. Stewards are out there stewarding, like in this photograph, meeting the public. They're there every Saturday and Sunday. They're on holidays, and also depending what's happening, they're there during the week as well. For example, with this Appalachian Trail bridge closure kind of emergency, we've got stewards there almost every day. And we also have stewards performing trail maintenance. So in this picture, you can see two stewards crushing rock for surfacing a trail, and they're doing trail maintenance or even trail building like this at least twice a week, every week for 6 months. And so they learn a lot about what it takes to maintain a trail and even build a trail. And they are able to then use that knowledge for recruiting volunteers and explaining what's going on and to the visitors, and it allows them to just have a deeper appreciation and have a better experience themselves, but also a more effective communication line with everybody, because they understand trails that much better. And the trails benefit because they get maintained and built. So our trail stewards, with that knowledge, they build excitement about being in nature, and they cultivate and recruit volunteers, and they do that just by seeing people in person. And they recruit volunteers to serve on work trips and perform trail maintenance and trail building and garbage pickups. And to me, the best part about this whole thing is that the visitors then become the very people who protect our parks and our open spaces and our public trails. And many of these people that speak to the stewards, they will become lifelong volunteers with our organization, and they're finding out how to volunteer because trail stewards are telling them in person how to get involved. And down at the trailhead, new stewards or trail stewards welcome visitors. They supply trail maps. They teach new hikers how to read trail maps and how to read trail markers. And they suggest routes, route options, loops. They teach people how to avoid poison ivy, how to avoid ticks. And trail stewards are providing an orientation to the outdoors. They help people connect with nature. They reduce the need for rescues. They reduce the need for emergency response. They're protecting the natural resource from the increased use. And trail stewards outreach, it educates visitors to care for the trails and the natural areas that the trails traverse. Trail stewards are just part of our trail conference response to the dramatic rise of increased use of trails in our region. And I think trail stewards are making a huge difference, and I have the data to prove it. So that's the conclusion of my slideshow, and I'm really passionate about this program and very happy to answer your questions that you may have for me.
Thank you so much, Hank. Yeah, so feel free, it's a small group, to either chat and I will read your question aloud, or chime in if there is a question. It's a small group, so I think we can handle that. While people are thinking, Hank, so we see that there are 8 locations, or many locations in the 8 years since the Trail Steward program. How are locations chose, and is there any instance where we've actually had to not, say no, that we couldn't handle it? And kind of another layer to that question, I notice a lot of them are in New York, if not all of them. If you could touch on that.
Yeah, so unfortunately, a lot of it comes down to funding, but we are trying to go where we're needed most. And We do have trail stewards in New Jersey. They are trained by us. They are paid by New Jersey DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, pays those stewards. We train them. They report to us. They wear our logo, and they complete our daily reports. And that's our biggest program in New Jersey. In New York, we've been able to be positioned at trailheads where the outcry is so huge that funding from private individuals is able to back that. But it's a situation where we're saying no an awful lot because we just can't grow or expand or grow fast enough, especially with the dramatic rise in visitorship that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years. It's everywhere is getting so popular, and now that people are finding out what we're doing, more and more areas and regions are coming to the trail conference asking for help in designing a program for them. So I've been speaking with groups for the last several years about helping other organizations across the country get programs going. We did. I've done a couple webinars with American Trails. One of them I did a few months ago. We had 900 people on my webinar, and we had an executive director from almost every state in the country contacting us, wanting more information for how they can replicate our program. So we're trying our best to create the documentation and materials necessarily for helping to spread what we've learned and help other areas. And we're doing our best to raise the money to put people right where we can in our actual region where we work, in the Hudson Valley and Catskills in New Jersey.
Great, thank you so much. Does anybody else have any questions to ask Hank, or want to get involved? So let's see, we do have a question. Let me just read it a little bit. Has the trail conference been exploring any solutions for issues related to certain trails that get excessive usage? For instance, Jeff has recently hiked Mount Newmark in the Adirondacks, and he had to essentially reserve a time slot in order to do the hike. Any ideas of implementing something like that around the New York area?
Yeah, so the way that Trail Stewards ties into that is that our Trail Steward programs have gotten such a good reputation that we are now invited to have a seat at the table at pretty much every one of those discussions that happens anywhere in this part of the state or northern New Jersey, when there's a talk of trying to figure out how to regulate like the number of visitors per hour or per day or at a time, and all the different potential solutions. We're now there speaking with the land managers and the partners and the other stakeholders to figure out what the best response might be. And sometimes it's to make a reservation, and sometimes it's parking situations and changing the way parking is allowed. And there's all sorts of different ideas being talked about. And the trail conference is now right there at the table discussing them. And our big thing is we want to provide access for people to get out into the woods, and we also want to protect the woods. So how do you design a program that does both of those things? And we think education is a huge part of the solution.
Great, thank you, Hank. And I also wanted to note too that the volunteer component of the Trail Stewards is a newer arm of that, and 40 is a very impressive number, especially to have people essentially be out either for a half day or a full day. You know, that seems like a really great solution. Is that something we are going to continue to expand? And if so, is that going to be able to help us maybe add more locations, or is it just going to loosen the burden on the stewards that we actually have and in the paid locations?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we are actively working to expand the volunteer trail steward programs as much as we can in as many areas and as large as a program as we can field. And yeah, we've trained probably 80 total stewards for the Ashokan Rail Trail, and that program is a huge success, where we have people almost 7 days a week, almost year round. We have a steward, at least one steward, sometimes 6 or 7 at a time on that trail, but almost every day of the year we have people there. That's a great success story. It takes a lot of management and oversight and a lot of people, staff for that particular. I'll just use that example. So we've got Ulster County Planning Department and the Woodstock Land Conservancy and New York City DEP that owns the reservoir, and the Trail Conference, and we need to meet regularly to design the program and redesign the program and communicate with the stewards and schedule the stewards and get them the support and everything they need. And it's not just about getting people there; it's also about reporting and collecting the data, because without the reports, you can't. Like the Ashokan Rail Trail, trees fall across it all the time, and we need the stewards to be able to go out and clear the trees. And if it's too big for them to get with a handsaw, they need to be able to have a way to report it so that someone can get it with a chainsaw, and it has to happen quickly. So it's all about support and oversight and communication. And even with the volunteer program, it's a lot of effort to do it right. It takes a lot of time, but it's totally worth it, because we've got this incredible resource, this incredible asset up there that is running with technically a full volunteer trail steward presence, It's professionally managed by multiple entities, but it's a huge success story. And we've been trying for several years to get one off the ground in Hudson Highlands and Fonsdock State Park. And this is our most successful yield to date. Now we have 10 or 12 active trail stewards, and the difference. I'm just going to quickly talk about volunteer and Americorps trail stewards. Is the Americorps members are basically stewards 40 hours every week, and with volunteers, I like them to be able to steward as frequently or as infrequently as they wish on the trail of their choice when they would like to, for the duration of their choice. So that means that our most frequent volunteer trail stewards are going out about once a week or every other week for about a half day. So that equals about 4 hours a week. So it's about a tenth the number of hours that the Americorps stewards are doing, but it's really effective, and the volunteers that we have trained and that are doing it are really, really, really great with the visitors and their communication and connecting with people. And it's something that we are really pleased with and want to continue to make it grow and expand and do in other areas.
Hank, I really like the idea of the personal talking and understanding more than just rules that do this, don't do this, which I don't think really works so well. I did learn a little extra actually, but in New Hampshire 2 weeks ago, leave no trace. I've heard people, what I think is sloppy, just saying leave no trace. It's an elitist phrase without explanation. When I saw the 7 points, and in discussion, they are so meaningful, but and I have a bigger problem with erase the trace, which I think regular people don't have a clue what that is, but leave the trace with the 7 meaningful points and people talking, I think is very, very important. And I love the parts about even adding what to do in the towns, build a good relationship. Yes, you do have to say no to flip-flops, but there are other things that are more persuasive, I guess you'd say. Yeah, and it seems that you're doing an awful good job getting people working in that kind of way. I didn't know about the Vernal pool. I guess that's on my trail.
Oh yeah, it's brand new. It's a brand new program. We tried to launch it last year. We did it for I think 3 weeks in early 2020 before we pulled everybody out of the field at the start of this pandemic, and then we did it again with 2 stewards this year for the full vernal pool season, which ends in I think we ended the program in late April or mid-April, so it's not it's kind of a winter thing, almost very early spring,
just before the peepers do their
right
big thing.
Yeah.
Thank you though, because I'm a Washburn trail maintainer.
All right.
And I love peepers, so
all right.
Yes,
thank you for your work, Jane, and thank you for your nice comments.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions or comments, thoughts? Well, again, thank you so much, Hank, for giving this talk. It was very insightful, and it's really incredible to watch the program grow, and I can only imagine what it's going to look like in the next 2 years, in the next 5 years, until we take over the region completely. And it's just a household thing that everyone knows that they can rely on a trail steward when they're going to their popular destination or the eco-sensitive areas that need some human interaction to kind of deflect from feet trampling on sensitive areas. So ways that you could help, as Hank mentioned, this is a predominantly funded program from individuals. So always supporting the program through our donate page. We have a whole Trail Steward donate section because it is one of those programs that is constantly looking where we're going to get funds for the next year. So it would be really great if we could project that out a few years as well. And then also become involved as a volunteer. As Hank mentioned, we have about 40 volunteers. If this is something passionate that you see and would like to give it a whirl, you could reach out to either me, who's been corresponding about this webinar, and I can get you in touch with Hank. You could always have the training, go out on locations, and if it's an area that you see has a need, you know, it could always be something that is looked at in the future. So thank you so much for joining us. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out and I will direct you to the appropriate parties. But thank you all for joining us today, and I look forward to having some in-person events in the future. So thank you everybody for joining, and stay cool and stay hydrated. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Hank. Very insightful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.